Three, two, one.
Welcome to the Horror Chronicles, where we take you on a journey through the unexplainable and the supernatural. Today's story takes place in a house in Dublin, where a family moved in with high hopes for a fresh start. But what they didn't know was that this house had a dark secret, one that would soon reveal itself in terrifying ways. Join us as we explore the haunting events that took place within those walls, where the creaking of stairs and the sound of a faint moan were just the tip of the iceberg. This is a story that will leave you questioning the existence of the unknown and the power of a satanic hatred. So, sit back, close the door of your room and prepare to be terrified, because they are in the room with you at this time. And put your headphones and get ready for a hair-raising experience. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button, like, and share to join us on more unforgettable real stories. Let's reach 2,000 likes together. When I was a child of about 12, my father settled in Dublin, and we lived in the house on a lease for 3 years, the rent being very low, and so the landlord stated, by the fact that there are many stairs in the house, which is an advantage to most people and a curse to all servants, he said no, something about ghosts, nothing else. When my dad was signing the leases, we moved in at the end of July, and until mid-September, we didn't realize we were home again. Haunted till it happened. My father and the maids were out one evening, and there was only my mother and me and my little brother in the house. It was about 8 o'clock. I was upstairs in my brother's room, reading to him, and my father was in the living room 2 floors below. I was telling my brother Teddy the story in the book, when he stopped me and said, "Did you hear that?" Then he shouted, "There's someone on the stairs." I paused and heard a loud creak, worriedly wondering who he is. Is there only our mother in the house? I closed the book and went out looking at the stairs extending down and down, carefully. No one was there, but when I got to the top of the stairs, I heard a loud shriek, and then a faint moan, as if someone had fallen. I ran downstairs to find out what had happened. I reached the hall, then I slowly opened the parlor door and looked cautiously, to find in the middle of the room a pale face with a pair of eyes shining into the dark with expressive looks, about satanic hatred. I was so terrified, and yet I opened the door a little wider, to see that terrifying face. It was a short, old woman, dressed in old black clothes, and her face was unspeakably ugly. Then she rushed towards me and climbed the stairs, shaking her hand menacingly in my face. And then she disappeared from the eyes, and I heard her continue to climb the stairs, step by step, until she came to a room. Teddy, who cried out loud. I was very terrified, and remained motionless, but praise be to God. I heard the sound of the front door lock key, and my father entered. What happened to my mom? She was on the floor passed out in cold extremities. We lit the kerosene lamp, and I brought her some brandy, and stayed with her, and I hurried upstairs to Teddy. The latter was very afraid, and remained in that state for a few days, until he came up and began to speak of what had happened. Of course, mother and father made up a story for him about the lady he saw, and that she was a friend of the servants, and came to visit one of them. But I suppose they considered my age sufficient to know the truth, since they had openly discussed the incident in my presence. My mother was knitting quietly in the drawing room, when suddenly she felt a very cold hand on her shoulder, and then pushed her from her chair with the intention of closing the door, and when she turned to her, she found that nasty old woman. After that, my father searched the house, but he did not find anyone, and all the windows were closed, and all the doors were locked from the inside, and we could not conclude anything other than that my mother saw an old man. A few days later, my father seemed to have been out of his bedroom when he saw a woman crawling down the stairs downstairs in front of him. He followed her with his eyes, and when she lifted her head to him, he asked her name, but she made a wicked, chilling smile and vanished down into the darkness. I think my father was very frightened. He came into the breakfast room with a pale face. He ate hardly any food. Sometime after these incidents, when autumn was at its end, my uncle came to stay with us. He was a brave sailor, had fought the Turks at Navarone, and had many exciting adventures with the Chinese pirates. No one told him the house was haunted, and we decided he should know by himself. Several days after his arrival at noon, he was taking off his shoes in a room downstairs, when he looked up at the door and found a pretty girl in a classic dark green dress that I think was worn in the days of his great-grandparents. Jack, surprises, was my dad, and fun too, that seductress. He knows, nothing pleases me more than to see such a beautiful girl. What offered her his hand to shake her hand, and then she ran in front of him and climbed the stairs quickly. My uncle followed her, and she led him until she reached the living room. And there, she stopped and put the index finger of her left hand on her lips in warning. Then she quietly turned the doorknob and motioned for him to follow her inside. My uncle hurried after her. The moment he crossed the threshold was standing in the middle of the room, an old woman with a large pale face and a pair of glistening black eyes. Nowhere was there a trace of a young and beautiful lady. Completely disappeared. My uncle was completely shocked, and quickly ran out of the room, shouting at my father, who entered the room with him, only to find it empty of any women. That evening, we were having our supper with my uncle, who tried to change the discourse of the dreadful event he had witnessed in the afternoon into jest, and recounted his many brave adventures. And when we were finished, we passed near the room to go up into the attic, when we heard a shriek coming from within. My mother froze in her place as if a scorpion was about to sting her, and my uncle suppressed his laughter because of her speed in fixing herself. Then he turned the handle and opened the door of the room, and entered it with my father. I looked inside to see the scene that will never be erased from my memory as long as I live. Huge silver candlesticks were overturned, and the floor was littered with piles of broken glass, antiques, and plates of food, everything smashed and destroyed. Amidst the wreckage, his face turned towards the farthest corner of the room where a very beautiful girl stood. She raised her head to find a wound across her neck, but her eyes were partially open, and next to her appeared a tall man with sharp features, holding a dagger in his hand, smiling at us sympathetically. Came out behind him a woman very much like him, and stood beside him with evil eyes, uttering the same happy indignation. It was the old woman whom I had seen that night in the hall. My father said in terror, "Some prayers," while the whole house shook, and we heard loud footsteps on the stairs, and satanic laughter echoing through the house, the whole thing. And then they all disappeared. The girl, the man, and the old man. That was the end. We left right after that, and since that day, we haven't come back to that house. Do not forget to subscribe to the channel, and hit the like button to encourage us.